The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm orange glow over the barren landscape. The wind howled through the ruins, scattering dust and debris in every direction. It was a desolate place, a world once thriving, but now reduced to rubble. The human hero stood at the center of a broken city waiting. In front of him, the alien king towered, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the ground. His eyes were cold, unfeeling, as he watched the human closely. The king had come for one purpose and one purpose only, to prove that humanity was no match for his kind. He sneered, clearly enjoying the feeling of superiority. "Take her," the alien king said, his voice deep and mocking. "This is your prize. You should feel honored." The human hero's gaze followed the king's gesture, and there, lying in a makeshift contraption of metal and cloth, was the alien princess. She was broken, her body frail and lifeless, her limbs twisted in unnatural angles. Her face was pale, her eyes shut, and her breathing shallow. Her once beautiful features were now marred by the marks of suffering and pain. "She is useless," the king continued with a smirk. "A burden to anyone who dares take her. You are free to do with her as you wish, but know this: she will never be anything more than a burden." The human hero's heart sank. He had heard of the alien princess. Rumors of her beauty and strength had spread across the galaxy. But what lay before him was not the powerful warrior they had described. She was nothing like the tales he had heard. She was broken, helpless, and weak. Yet, despite the king's cruel words, something stirred deep within him. There was more to her than the king let on. He took a step forward, cautiously approaching the broken figure. He could feel the weight of the king's mockery upon him. Every part of his body screamed to turn away, to leave the princess to her fate. But he couldn't. Something inside him wouldn't allow it. He knelt beside her, gently lifting her frail body and inspecting her more closely. Her skin was cold, and her breath was faint, but there was something in her expression. Something that suggested she still held on to life, even if only just. Her hair, long and dark, lay tangled around her face, but even in this state, it was clear she had once been a symbol of grace and strength. "Why?" the hero whispered, his voice barely audible, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "Why would a father do this to his own daughter?" The alien king chuckled from behind him, the sound echoing off the walls of the ruined city. "Because she is weak. She has failed me, and now I am rid of her. You can have her if you think you can do something with her. But I doubt it. She will never be what she once was." The human hero stood, lifting the princess gently into his arms. As he did, the king turned and began to walk away, his figure slowly fading into the distance. "Good luck," the king called over his shoulder, his voice laced with mockery. "You'll need it." The hero didn't respond. He knew the king, thought of him as nothing more than a fool. But there was something about the princess, something in her eyes when they met his for that brief moment, that told him she wasn't entirely lost. There was a spark in her, small but undeniable. The human hero carried her through the ruins, the weight of her fragile body a constant reminder of her brokenness. He knew the task before him was impossible. The alien princess was weak, and there was no denying that. But as he looked down at her, he felt a determination build inside him. He couldn't abandon her. He couldn't just leave her to die in a forgotten corner of the universe. She deserved more than that. He found a quiet spot in the ruins, a place sheltered from the wind and the harshness of the outside world. Gently, he laid her down on the ground, covering her with a cloth to shield her from the elements. He knew he had to act quickly. There was no telling how much longer she could survive like this. The hero knelt beside her and began to inspect her injuries. Her breathing was still shallow, and there were cuts and bruises all over her body. But it was more than just her physical wounds. He could see the deep emotional scars that ran through her, the despair in her eyes when she opened them. It was as if the princess had given up, like there was nothing left to fight for. He ran his fingers through his hair, frustration building. How could he help someone who had already lost the will to live? How could he help someone who had been abandoned by their own father? The task seemed impossible. The weight of it threatened to overwhelm him. But then, a small voice inside him reminded him of his own struggles, his own battles. He had been broken before, too. He had been beaten down by life, left with nothing but his own determination to move forward. If he could rise from the ashes, then maybe, just maybe, so could she. The human hero took a deep breath and made a decision. He wasn't going to give up on her. He wouldn't let her die in the shadows of this ruined world. He would help her find her strength again, no matter how long it took. And so he began to tend to her, not just physically but emotionally. He spoke to her softly, telling her that she wasn't alone, that there was hope. He refused to let the king's words haunt him. He refused to let her weakness define her. As the hours passed, the hero continued to work, his determination unwavering. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a journey, one that would test not only his strength but his heart. The Dao princess's true power had yet to be awakened, and the human hero would be the one to help her find it. The story was far from over, and the hero knew deep down that he had just taken the first step toward changing everything. The days passed, slowly each one blending into the next, but the hero's determination never wavered. He sat by the alien princess's side every moment he could, tending to her injuries and speaking to her softly. His heart ached every time he saw the pain and fear in her eyes. The princess had been through so much, both physically and emotionally, and the burden of her brokenness seemed almost impossible to lift. The hero had tried everything he could think of. He gave her the best care he knew, from cleaning her wounds to providing her with food and water. But nothing seemed to break through the shell of hopelessness surrounding her. She remained silent, her body still too weak to move, her mind, too, shattered to engage. The first few days were the hardest. The silence between them was deafening. She hardly ever opened her eyes, and when she did, it was as though she wasn't truly seeing anything. It was as though she had given up, not just on life, but on herself. The hero felt the weight of his task pressing down on him. How could he help someone who didn't want to be helped? How could he heal someone whose very soul seemed broken beyond repair? He spent hours reflecting on this, sitting beside her, his mind racing with unanswered questions. He didn't know what the princess had been through, what had broken her so completely. But he knew that whatever it was, it had to have been devastating. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the princess stirred. For the first time in days, she moved, her fingers twitching slightly. The hero's heart skipped a beat. He rushed to her side, watching in awe as she struggled to lift her hand. "Princess," he whispered, his voice filled with both hope and concern. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing tired, dull eyes that looked at him with uncertainty. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at him as if unsure of his presence. Then finally her voice broke through the silence. "You," her words were weak, barely a whisper. Why are you doing this?" The hero felt a lump form in his throat. She was speaking, and yet the sadness in her voice was palpable. "Because you matter," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You're not just a broken thing to be discarded. You have value. More than you know." Her eyes searched his face, and for a moment it seemed as though she might understand. But the doubt quickly returned, clouding her expression. "I'm too broken," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm not worth saving. The alien king was right to cast me aside. Hero felt a sharp pang of sorrow. He gently took her hand in his, squeezing it reassuringly. "You are not broken," he said firmly. "You're just hurt, just like anyone else who's been through something terrible. But that doesn't make you worthless. It makes you strong." The princess closed her eyes, shaking her head. "I've failed," she murmured. "I've failed my people, I've failed my father. What use am I now?" The hero's heart ached for her, for the deep despair that consumed her. But he refused to give up on her. He had seen the strength she held inside even if she couldn't see it herself. She had the potential to rise above this pain. He knew that, but he couldn't make her see it. She had to see it for herself. For the next few days, the hero continued to care for her, but he also tried something different. Instead of only focusing on her physical wounds, he began to talk to her more. He shared stories about his own past, his struggles, and how he had fought to overcome them. He told her about the times he had felt broken, alone and defeated, but how he had found strength in the smallest of things. His determination, his will to survive, and the belief that things could get better if he kept moving forward. Each day the princess seemed to listen more. Her eyes began to show more life, more awareness. She was still weak, still fragile, but there was a spark, just a tiny flicker of hope, that had begun to shine through the darkness of her despair. One afternoon, as the hero sat by her side, he noticed something new. She was staring at her, hands, her fingers trembling as she flexed them for the first time in weeks. Her muscles, once stiff and unused, were beginning to respond. She looked up at him, her gaze hesitant but filled with curiosity. "You told me that I could become stronger," she said, her voice still faint but growing in confidence. "Do you really think I can?" The hero smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile that lit up his face. "Yes, I do, but you have to believe it too. Strength isn't just about how much you can fight or how much you can endure. It's about accepting yourself even when you're weak, and trusting that you can grow stronger from there. You're not alone in this. I'm here." For the first time, a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was a start. The hero's heart swelled with pride. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that the road ahead would be long and full of challenges, but this moment, this small breakthrough was everything. The princess had started to believe again, even if it was just a little. And that was enough. As the days continued to pass, the hero and the princess formed an unspoken bond, a connection built on mutual respect and shared strength. The princess's body grew stronger with each passing day, and with it, her spirit. Slowly, she began to open up to the hero, sharing the stories of her life, the pain she had endured, and the fear of failure that had haunted her for so long. But as she spoke, the hero listened, never judging, never pushing her to move faster than she was ready. He understood that healing, both physical and emotional, took time. It wasn't a quick fix, it was a process. But every day, the princess was moving closer to the person she was meant to be. The journey was just beginning, and both of them knew it. The road ahead would be difficult, but they were no longer facing it alone. Together, they would find the strength to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. Days turned into weeks, and the princess's condition began to improve steadily. But it wasn't just her body that was healing. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stirring inside her, a flicker of hope, something she thought she had lost forever. It was as though the hero's words were beginning to take root, his belief in her slowly shifting her mindset. She began to push herself more to train her body, but more importantly, to trust in her own strength. The human hero spent hours with her each day, not just caring for her physical needs, but offering her the tools to regain control of her life. He taught her the basics of movement and exercise, starting with small, simple tasks. He began with stretching, showing her how to gently flex her fingers, her arms, and her legs. It wasn't much, but it was a start. With each movement, the princess felt something change inside her, a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in ages. One day, the hero led her to a small clearing in the ruins, the sunlight filtering through the broken trees. It was a quiet place, calm and peaceful, far from the mocking presence of the alien king. The hero set up a training space, the ground covered in soft sand, ideal for starting her physical recovery. "You're ready to begin," he said, his voice firm but warm. "You've been through so much, but it's time to see what you're really capable of. We're not going to rush this, we'll take it one step at a time." The princess, still weak but growing stronger, nodded silently. She could feel her muscles aching, but it was a different kind of pain. It wasn't the pain of helplessness. It was the pain of rebuilding, of rediscovering what she had lost. She hesitated for a moment before standing up, her legs shaky beneath her, but the human hero was there steadying her. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You already are," he replied softly. "You just have to keep going." With his support, the princess slowly began to move, taking small steps and gradually working through the exercises. At first it was difficult. Her body was still weak, and her mind was filled with doubts. But with each small victory, with each moment when she managed to stretch a little further or lift herself a little higher, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The more she moved, the more she realized that the strength wasn't just physical. There was something deeper, something that connected her to the world, to herself. Days turned into weeks again, and the princess's training grew more intense. The hero pushed her, but never too much. He knew that her healing was a delicate balance of body and mind. They spent hours together, the hero guiding her through each new challenge. And with each new challenge, the princess began to see herself differently. She wasn't just the broken alien princess anymore. She was someone capable of strength, capable of change, capable of overcoming the darkness that had once consumed her. One evening, after a particularly difficult training session, the princess sat on a stone, her breathing heavy but steady. The hero sat beside her, offering her a canteen of water. She accepted it gratefully, but as she drank, she glanced at him with a newfound expression, one of quiet determination. "I feel stronger," she said, the words coming out almost as a revelation. "Not just physically, but in here." She touched her chest. "In my heart. It's like I've been asleep for so long and now I'm finally waking up." The hero smiled, his pride evident in his eyes. "I knew you had it in you, but remember, this is just the beginning. You've come a long way, but the hardest part is still ahead." The princess nodded, but this time, there was no hesitation in her eyes. She was no longer the broken alien princess who had been discarded by her father. She was a fighter, someone who had faced the darkness of her past and come out the other side stronger. She had awakened something inside her that she had thought was lost forever, the will to fight for herself. As the days continued, the princess's transformation became more and more evident. Her strength grew, not just in her body, but in her spirit. She began to find confidence in herself, no longer waiting for the hero to guide her every step of the way. She started to take the initiative, pushing herself further, testing the limits of what she could do. One morning, as the hero watched from a distance, he saw the princess standing tall, her posture strong and confident. She had begun running, her movements swift and fluid, each stride filled with purpose. It was as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore, she was living with purpose. She was no longer broken. She was becoming something greater. The hero walked up to her, his voice filled with pride as he said, "You're doing it. I knew you, had the strength inside you all along." The princess smiled, her face glowing with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "Thank you," she said softly. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. But now I believe." There was a silence between them, a silence that spoke volumes. The princess was no longer the fragile, helpless creature she had been when the human hero had first found her. She was strong, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in herself, and in doing so, she had awakened a power inside her that no one, no king, no alien, could ever take away. The human hero looked at her, a sense of fulfillment filling his heart. He knew this journey wasn't just about her healing, it was about them both growing, about facing the darkness of the past and walking toward a brighter future. He had helped her find her strength, but in doing so, she had helped him rediscover his own, and together they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The day had come, the moment the princess had been dreading but knew was inevitable. The human hero and the alien princess stood together, side by side, ready to face the one who had once cast her aside. The alien king. The ruins of the city stretched out before them, and the wind whispered of things to come. The air felt charged, heavy with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Yet despite the fear that still lingered within her, the princess felt a strength she had never known before. She turned to the hero, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, she saw not pity or concern in his gaze, but pride. He had always believed in her, even when she hadn't believed in herself. And now she stood on the brink of something far greater than she had ever imagined. She wasn't the broken alien princess anymore. She wasn't the discarded burden. She was someone with the power to change her fate, to reclaim her destiny. "We can do this," the hero said softly, his voice calm and reassuring. "You've already come so far. Now it's time to show him who you really are." The princess nodded, her heart beating strong and steady in her chest. "I'm ready." They walked toward the center of the city, where the alien king waited, his presence as imposing as ever. The king stood on a raised platform, his arms crossed, looking down at them with disdain. His eyes locked onto the princess, his gaze full of mockery. "So you've returned," the king sneered. "You truly believe you can challenge me now? After everything you've done? After everything you've failed to accomplish?" The princess felt the sting of his words, but instead of cowering, she stood taller, her shoulders squared. "I'm not here to challenge you, father," she said, her voice strong, yet calm. "I'm here to show you who I really am." The king's eyes narrowed, his expression turning from amusement to anger. "You were nothing. You always were nothing, and you'll always be nothing no matter how much you try to pretend otherwise." But the princess didn't flinch. Her heart was steady, her mind focused. The hero stood beside her, unwavering, as they faced the king together. She knew what she had to do. She didn't need to prove anything to the king. She had already proven everything to herself. "Perhaps you are right," the princess said quietly. "I may have been nothing to you. But I'm something now, something you can't understand. You see, you thought you could break me, that you could cast me aside like a useless thing. But you didn't break me. You made me stronger. You made me realize that my worth doesn't come from your approval. It comes from within." The king's face twisted with fury. "You dare defy me? I gave you life. I gave you everything. But you also took it all away." The princess replied, her voice firm, unwavering. "You took my freedom, my strength, my belief in myself. But now I've taken it back, and I'll never let you take it from me again." The king took a step forward, his towering figure casting a long shadow over her. He raised his hand, and a pulse of energy crackled around his fingers. "You think you can defy me? You think you can stand against me?" The princess didn't move. She stood tall, her eyes never leaving his. She could feel the power within her, a power that had been awakened in the darkest of times, a power that was now hers to command. She had trained for this moment, and now it was time to show the world and the king that she was no longer weak. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her body glowing with newfound energy. The hero, ever by her side, silently nodded in approval. They had come this far together, and now the moment had arrived. The princess raised her hands, and an aura of energy surrounded her. The king faltered for a moment, his eyes wide with disbelief. The princess wasn't just strong in body, she was strong in spirit. The power she had found inside herself had manifested in ways neither she nor the king could have ever imagined. "You think you can defeat me?" The king scoffed, his arrogance still evident. But the princess wasn't listening anymore. She was beyond his taunts, beyond his threats. She had already won. With a fierce shout, the princess released her energy, sending a wave of power rippling through the air. The force of it knocked the king back, sending him sprawling to the ground. His expression was no longer one of superiority, but of confusion and fear. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated the strength that lay within her, a strength that had been born from her struggles, her pain, and her determination to never give up. The hero watched from the side, his heart swelling with pride. He had known all along that the princess had it in her. She had always had the potential to be greater than even she had realized. And now, She had proven it, not just to him, but to the entire world. The alien king, now on his knees, looked up at the princess, his arrogance finally replaced by respect. He had underestimated her. He had thought her weakness was her destiny, but he was wrong. The princess wasn't just her father's daughter. She was a force to be reckoned with. I was wrong, the king muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. You've changed. The princess looked down at him, her gaze steady and unwavering. I haven't changed, she said softly. I've just become who I was always meant to be. The king stood slowly, his once mighty presence diminished before her. He had been the one who had mocked her, broken her, and cast her aside. But now he saw her not as a weakling, but as a force of nature, as someone who had turned her weakness into the greatest strength of all. With a final defiant glance at her father, the princess turned to the hero. She smiled, her face glowing with triumph, knowing that no matter what came next, she had found her strength, and nothing could ever take it from her again. Together they walked away from the battlefield, leaving behind the ruins of the past. The princess had transformed, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. She had gone from being broken to being whole. And now, she was ready to face whatever future lay ahead, knowing that her true strength came from within. The princess was no longer a victim of her past. She was the hero of her own story.